Hi, I'm Jane and I'm the co-founder of Podville, which is a community of office spaces in Bristol built from repurposed shipping containers. So this is episode 2 of the Podville Diaries, which I'm creating to share my experience of the whole process from concept to fruition. We recently completed the site and we have tenants moving in at the moment, and I was able to stop and look back at what we'd achieved and share some of the experiences in case it's of value to somebody or inspires someone to do the same. So this episode I'm talking about the design considerations, the planning and the site preparation. So starting with the design considerations, well, I think if you're looking at a site for shipping containers, then obviously you've got to think about what the land looks like, how they're going to fit on the land. So even before that, perhaps finding a piece of land for containers. Well, we were lucky because we owned the site anyway, both sites. So Bristol is our first development and Milton Keynes is coming later on this year. Both pieces of land were car parks in an existing business park. So we had to think about how you can configure them. Also, if you're looking at actually buying a piece of land, then you've got to think about return on investment. Or if you're leasing land, can you get your money back? So you need a long enough lease. I would say upwards of 10 years, which is not easy. So a lot of the sites that are perfect for containers are generally storage sites. Maybe don't have services on them, maybe just a 2-year lease. So they're quite hard to come across. Luckily we owned our sites already, so we could pretty much do what we wanted with them. Obviously you had to consider the design and the layout. So things like overhead power lines. So we had, in Bristol there's some overhead power lines because it's actually next to a substation. So we had to think about how to get the containers into the site and put in position, because you generally brought in on a high-ab, which is a flatbed with a crane. So the crane needed a certain amount of clearance underneath the power cables. We've got to make sure there's enough space for access around the containers for fire and for wheelchair access. You've also got to think about your services, your drainage, utilities, fibre connection. So when you're looking at a site, maybe get a drain survey so you know exactly where the drainage is, and the telecommunications, the wastewater. So that's something we had to do in Milton Keynes because we didn't know where they were, and it's quite a large site. When you're working out the configuration of the containers, obviously you've got to think about your light, if you're going to stack them high or if you're going to have a single story. Also think about the actual container. So the strength of the container is in the 4 corners, not on the edges. So if you took away the sides of the container and just kept it, they would actually sag. So the strength is in the 4 corners, and the sides actually help to keep the shape, keep the container rigid. And that's probably where you need the help of an architect. So we got Charles and Saltzman Architects, who are based in Bristol. They'd already managed to get 2 container projects through planning. So we thought, well, yeah, they know how to do it. So we asked them to help us. Parking is another thing you've got to think about. So they helped us work out how many parking spaces we needed for the site. If it's out of town like ours was, then you need more because obviously people are going to drive there. If it's in the centre of town, then maybe you can get away with less parking spaces, but it all depends on your council. Because we were putting 14 offices in Bristol and also 23 offices over in Milton Keynes, we had to think about additional power consumption. So that's something to consider when you're looking at your site. The utilities company can help you do that, or someone that specialises in utilities and groundworks, which is what someone helped us with in Milton Keynes. So yeah, have a think about that because that's something to consider. Your fibre as well is something is worth considering early on, because you've got to get potentially way leave agreements. A way leave agreement is basically allows you to get the fibre onto your site, going under a public area, a footpath, a road. So the fibre company need to be able to access your land. So we applied for full planning permission for Bristol and for Milton Keynes, and we were successful. Hardly any conditions, just materials and soil investigation survey and bike parking. So super easy to satisfy those conditions. I think we were very lucky. I don't know, can't go by, I don't know about every council, but we had no problems at all to get full planning for our container project. So site preparation, what do you need to put on the site to support the containers? Well, obviously they're quite heavy, so you need to put either a concrete slab to support the weight of the containers. Concrete slab is quite expensive, and actually it's not necessary because you only need to support the containers in the four corners, because that's where the strength is. So we put concrete pillars. We drove them down. We dug out, I think it was about a foot into the ground, and built up some concrete pillars, and then we put concrete pad stones on top. There's different ways of doing it. You can put concrete pad stones straight on the surface. It depends on what the ground is, really. Because we had to do a ground investigation survey, we knew that it was made ground with concrete on top. So we knew it would be pretty sturdy. Obviously it depends on the levels of made ground and the thickness of the concrete. But we realised that we wouldn't need to do foundations or anything like that, or underpin the site. The important thing is to make sure that the site is flat and level, because your containers need to be completely level. In Bristol it certainly was not level, so we had to think about how to raise it up and make sure that it was level. Thanks for watching, and next episode I'm going to be talking about the build, so the construction phase and the fit out of the containers.